Welcome back to Destination Aviation. And if you're listening on your normal favorite platform, everything is A-OK and nothing seems different to you. But if you watch us on YouTube, you will see my ugly mug in front of you now. We have new software with Riverside that is allowing us to do a little, hopefully improve the audio. I've heard some comments about audio when we do these remotely. So hopefully this will enhance it as we continue to work through it. So I appreciate everybody as I navigate the ways to become a better podcaster for you. But I always appreciate the comments that I receive in, and you guys help me to be better. And so quest for that is this software. So if you're watching me on YouTube, you can see my lovely white and gray sweater here in the home office. But we have a conversation today with Sean White, not the snowboarder. And I will refrain from asking him about that until the very end of that podcast. But he is the Executive Vice President, FBO Development, VP with Jet Access, fixed base operator. So he is our second fixed base operator person to be on the podcast. So we'll finish up as we normally do with some show notes at the end of this. And we'll just get right into our interview with Sean White. And thanks for coming along. If you are normally on the normal channels, thanks for listening. And if you are on our other format, which is visually, hello, and I will wave to you. All right, we're off to our interview with Sean White. Well, Sean, welcome to Destination Aviation.
Thanks for having me, Jeff. Really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Excited
and
to
thank
be here.
you for being the first one on my new software and the first one that will be done visually. So look at that.
I love
Everybody
it.
gets
I
to
love
see
it.
your handsome mug.
Just
And
get this
mine.
side, not this side, right?
Yeah, right. Which side of my bald head looks better? So what I was telling Sean, for the listeners before we got on, I purchased new software, Riverside, that allows us to do visual. So this will be uploaded to YouTube, but the audio will be on all the normal audio streaming channels, which you're probably listening to right now. So I apologize to Sean up front if me, the host, has any issues as we navigate this process. But I'm going to say here in the first 51 seconds, Sean, it looks like it's recording well.
Well, it looks like it's working well. Looks good from my end. So it's and it seems like you might have made a good purchase.
Hey,
So
well, well, we're going to find out here in a minute. If we talk for over an hour and it's all gone, don't blame me.
that's fair enough. We'll just re-record it, right?
Yeah, right. Well, Sean, I think we met probably a few years ago now. I might have been MBAA. Was that the first time we had met each other?
NBAA or S. I mean, both of them are NBAA events, either base or S&D. One of those events. We've been. I think half the time our booths are sitting around the corner from each other, and of course during those lulls you kind of walk around going, "Hey, who's around me?" We started chatting, I think, at that point. So
yeah, absolutely. And you're with Jet Access, as so shows your quarter zip there.
yeah, absolutely, yeah. So I'm my role officially is I think her title is Executive Vice President of FBO Development at Jet Access, but yes, I'm I'm on our leadership team, and we kind of operate in a number of different spaces in the aviation sector. I kind of speak most specifically to the FBO side of the business. We have 8 locations for that, but then we also operate a management and charter division. We have a flight training division, sales and brokerage, and then maintenance. And then we also started a new thing called the Jet Access Broker Alliance as well. So we kind of say we have 6 aviation verticals that we operate in. So that's the 30,000 foot quick as I can make it elevator speech.
You know what, though? I think that summed it up quite nicely. So that's 2 minutes and 40 seconds. And thanks for joining the show. No, that's, it's interesting with such a diverse portfolio. So on this channel, we've had a lot of people that have come on. So a good portion of the listeners are not a part of the industry. And so we have had another fixed base operator on, but that episode got a little wonky, I'll say, because at that time the person had just switched over and, there was like that process. And so we couldn't talk directly about the company they were with. And so that's where the wonkiness came in.
Yeah.
So I think for the listeners, the fact that you can talk about your company, one, is
That
fantastic.
helps, right?
Yeah, right. That's a good thing. um, and two, it gives them a better knowledge of what an actual fixed base operator is. So the episode that will be coming out right before this one is maintenance repair overhaul facility with Westar,
Yep.
which was our first time having an MRO onto the show. And so in this case, like we'll get back to maybe the jet access here in a minute, but I know I've talked to some of your people and you guys have a really cool story with jet access, but how did you get into the industry? Because we have a lot of people that, come on to, this podcast and listen to it. And then they say, oh, well, I want to get into it and I want to do this. I want to do that. But what kind of sparked your adventure into aviation?
That's a great question, and my path is probably a little bit unusual for many. Always had an interest in aviation, loved aviation as a kid. Was a Trekkie too, so thought I was gonna maybe go into space one day. Explored the Air Force, but ended up getting my pilot's license as a teenager. So did the good old traditional, solo when you're 16, get your license when you're 17, track, and actually. Started at Purdue University with a scholarship for Air Force ROTC, but had kind of started down the aeronautical engineering path and learned that physics was not my thing. I did not want to do that for the rest of my life.
Seems fair.
And that kind of switched me over to the business side of the degree track. And through some other experiences I had a secondary love from aviation, which was politics, and leadership. And so I took a little diversion in my college career and actually transferred over to George Washington University in DC, finished my college career out there, and worked at the White House during the Bush
Wow.
and George W. Bush years for almost 6 years, both at the White House and then at the Small Business Administration and HUD. So had some unique experiences there. But in 2008, as what happens with any administration when there's a changeover, we all got fired.
Ah,
And so, because Obama was not keeping the Bush people, and
that
so
seems fair.
fair enough. So
Fair enough.
I grew up in Indiana and moved back to Indiana from DC, and really kind of through a number of things. I did economic development for a while, and kind of transitioned into it. But my passion and love for aviation never went away, and I was in the uh, uh, I, sorry, did we get a little glitch there?
Think we did, but I would just keep rolling with it because I'm pretty sure that this
Okay.
program, we'll find out together. I think it automatically edits out glitches, but you were talking about getting back to Indiana and it just glitched for there for a second.
Yeah, I think we actually had a little power outage here. Like my screens and
Oh, did
everything
you?
went blank. So
Oh, wow.
it seemed like it was a quick little power thing.
Do you guys
Um,
have weather or is it?
no, it's
Oh,
pretty clean here. So, but there's some construction going on around the airport.
wow.
So
That seems
somebody might have
fair.
hit something. Um, Anyways, so came back to Indiana, did some economic development and other things, but had this lingering passion, I think, for aviation, like we always do. I was out in DC in that post 9/11 time frame when it was really hard to fly. And so got back in, got my instrument rating. And that started me down a path working with a local airport. Started by kind of getting engaged with their marketing, then did some other, actually started my own marketing firm doing aviation marketing for some small airports. Got engaged with AOPA, and started doing events with them as well. And actually, if you remember all the regional fly-ins that AOPA did from 2013 up until really last couple
Yeah.
of years, I helped lead that whole kind of initiative with AOPA
Oh,
for
wow.
years.
Wow. Well,
So,
it's
um,
we just
but
had Kyle Lewis on from he's a regional manager with
yep,
AOPA.
Kyle's a good friend. Yep,
Oh yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
so he was talking up the Buckeye Air Show, but I think
yes.
so if I understand correctly, they kind of morphed from the regional air shows and that is that now they're more doing the
Yeah, they
Buckeye?
kind of moved away from kind of doing those. I mean, originally AOPA was like a one event a year, big kind of, they called it the expo. And I helped with a few of those. And then when Mark Baker came on, he transitioned to to kind of those regional fly-ins. And me and a small team of folks were really the ones that put those together initially. And those were fun. those were a challenge, but those were
Yeah,
fun.
I bet.
Um,
I'm thinking
and
about
then
going to
they
the one in Arizona. I told Kyle that because I was looking at the brochure. I'm like, "Ah, that looks like so much fun."
it is, but it's warm. I mean, so especially moving out of the Midwest, right? Both of
Yeah, I
us
was
are
gonna say,
here.
if, Arizona in February, I could probably do that.
Exactly, exactly. So did that for a few years, and we could talk more about that. But then, and then had an opportunity, kind of the airport that I'm physically sitting at right now, Indianapolis Executive, was getting sold. The FBO was getting sold by the longtime owners to a new ownership group, and he asked me at that point if I would come on and run it, and that was in October of 2015. And so I kind of ditched doing 5 different jobs and
Right.
decided to focus on one, and that was running the FBO here, and that has since transitioned ownership hands one more time. Um, and so I moved from running kind of 2 to 3 FBO locations that were part of the Eagle Creek First Wing family to Jet Access in 2021. Purchased the Eagle Creek group of companies, and then we ultimately have 8 locations now. So
No,
that's
it's
the
impressive. And with the jet access people, you can tell me I'm wrong here because I might be remembering, or maybe I dreamt this, but did they start in convenience stores? Was
There's
that?
actually, yes. So our ownership is the Ricker family,
Yeah.
and for those, especially again being from Indiana or the Midwest, people might remember Ricker's convenience stores. They were, at least as I grew up and whatnot, were kind of the top tier convenience store location. And they sold that business, kind of looking at the strategic headwinds that are facing convenience stores, both in the restaurant component of it as well as electrification and those things. They said, "Hey, we don't know that there's a long-term play in this industry," and so they got out, I think, in about 2018.
Okay.
Um, and they were users of private aviation at the time. And there were some opportunities that came to play with some local FBOs and the Jet Access brand, which was a charter company at the time, owned by Jack Lambert and Sean Honecker, out of both PBI and then JVY in Southern Indiana. There was an opportunity to kind of buy half of that, and through a number of transactions, kind of ended up moving from being users of aviation to owners of aviation, and thought this was going to be a really fun business to be in. And it
Yeah.
is. It is. It's got its challenges, but it's a fun business to be
I
in.
was
So
gonna say, if any industry has challenges, it's definitely this one. But it is, I often feel guilty sometimes about the fact that we get to be in, an industry that it's cool just at the heart of it. Like we do a lot of cool things in
absolutely.
aviation, and to be around it, sometimes I talk to other people, like it's funny because, in my career, normally I follow up, someone like we were just at in one of our FBOs doing an event, right? And you guys have the cool planes and the cool jobs, and I'm off to the side and I'm like, oh, let's talk about leases. And but I tell people, I'm like, well, you could be an airport manager and fly and have that kind of level of personal life balance. And but no, it is. It's, and you guys have a really cool product there. But I did want to back up a little bit because you threw so much there that was just I have to ask about something. But
Go for it.
so
Yeah,
when you,
like I said, it's a little bit of a winding road. So
yeah, right,
not your typical line guy, line manager up
right,
through the chain.
right.
So there's some good stuff there, though.
There is some good stuff in there. It's I was thinking about some older podcasts. So we had Alex Gershton on with an NBAA, and he had been on Air Force One a couple times through different administrations. And when you were on with the administration with George W., did you ever get a chance to get onto Air Force One? Or
No,
I'm sorry, I saw the look on your face, and I already knew
it,
the answer was going to be
because it
no.
was this close.
Oh.
And so because obviously for a guy who's kind of involved in politics and in
Yeah.
aviation, Air Force One's kind of the pinnacle, right? Like
Yes.
you want to get on Air Force One.
Yes.
But I was personal aide to a cabinet secretary in the later part of the administration. He was the head of the Small Business Administration, and then became head of Secretary of HUD. So we had a little bit of security, but we did not fly privately, most of the time commercially.
Sure.
Occasionally got on one of the smaller airplanes. But one time he was asked to fly on Air Force One with the president, and uh, the amount of energy I put into trying to get him at what's called a +1, which means you can take one person with you,
Yeah.
I put a lot of energy into that and was unfortunately unsuccessful. So the best consolation prize I could muster was getting the call from Air Force One. So I said,
Wow.
"You will
Okay.
call me," and so I did get the phone call where they pick up the phone and they say, "This is the Air Force One operator. I have so and so on the line for you." I was like, "Yeah, put him through."
Put it
So
there. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Oh, how's it going? No, I love, it's
so
funny. So, in Indiana, so I worked in South Bend, Indiana. And I was there when, Obama was campaigning, for oh, shoot, I guess it would have been Hillary at the time.
yeah,
And, South Bend is, I don't know, smaller is the right word, but it doesn't have military base at or anything. And so,
right.
when Air Force One came in, I worked closely with the Air Force guys, and so not flying, but they did give me a tour of it,
Oh, that's
and
awesome.
yeah, I couldn't take my phone or anything. I was like, "That's fine, I'll go. Don't worry about it." And the only knowledge I have of Air Force One is the movie with Harrison
With
Ford.
Harrison, yeah.
So I remember I was like, "Oh, this is the gun cabinet," and I slid it open, and there was a wheelchair in it, and they're like, "That's our ADA closet," and I was like, "Oh, okay, perfect."
You
But
were expecting an armament in there,
I
so
was, yeah, I was like, "Oh, is this?" Yeah, just slide it open and see all the guns. Yeah, right. Like they just, "Yeah, go ahead, good, bald guy, have fun." Yeah, no, I could
and
only
there's no
imagine.
escape pod down in the galley either.
Yeah, right. What's funny is I asked about it, and they all take it very seriously that they will not talk about any of the security protocols with the aircraft, and so
Yep.
they're like, "You're welcome to tour it, but don't." And I slipped up a few times because not one wasn't as much as slip. I asked that, and then they told me, "We're not going to tell you anything about stuff like that." I was like, "Okay, that's fair." But I remember when the movie came out, Bill Clinton supposedly watched it twice because they said most times presidents don't have time to watch movies, but they said in that case he's so interested in the movie portrayal of it that he watched it twice. So
It was a great movie. I
it
totally
it is.
I mean, I've watched it many, many times. It's a great
Right,
movie.
right. Well, and I just had I think it was somebody on this podcast or they said some of it was filmed over in was it Rickenbacker? Right over, state over from you?
Over in Ohio,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
wouldn't be surprised. I mean, that's a pretty large airfield. I didn't know that, but I wouldn't be surprised by that at all. It's a pretty
Yeah,
large
I didn't,
airfield with
and yeah, yeah, and I could be making up, but I feel the feeling it's the same as the convenience store. I think it's at least there enough. Maybe it
yeah,
wasn't Rickenbacker, maybe it was Patterson Air Force Base, but it was
yeah,
somewhere near the middle of Ohio.
yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough. So when you were going into aviation and then kind of the political, because the politics, especially in our industry, I mean, being so kind of invested within the federal silos and state silos, the way just aviation works, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. So I could imagine that you probably still use a lot of those skills today, right? Like, because a lot of times it's about grant funding and all sorts of fun stuff that goes along with building infrastructure at an airport.
Yeah, I think it gave me a unique background that I actually think plays into it because it's not just an operations entity, right?
Yeah.
So certainly as an FBO or an airport operator, it's a very unique business. We sit on ground that is owned by the federal government and the state government and a local sponsor. Typically, there's all levels of government involved. You've got boards and commissions involved. There's economic development that's part of it, typically. And so kind of that cross-functional background honestly has I think served me well in the industry because it's a very cross-functional industry. I mean, we have to kind of play in all these different spaces. It's not like going and standing up a restaurant or a store or something on a corner because we don't even own the land that we operate on.
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Right.
it's long-term leases, and when you're talking about improvements, the closest thing is like a TIF district or something that you might have in a local government kind of setup where you're trying to work together to figure out infrastructure improvements and stuff to make the development viable at the end of the day. So there's a lot of corollaries that are pretty useful and helpful from that kind of background. So
Oh yeah, yeah. No, it is. It's interesting because a lot of times, when I talk to people, about it, especially people that have nothing to do with the industry. I'm like, well, I understand why, maybe somebody doesn't completely get it or get it at all, because it is this kind of uniqueness of local government flair, predominantly in the United States, local government of some kind at the core of it, that's functioning really a federal asset
Yep.
where funds are being put into it. And so everybody has, their own kind of I don't know if opinion is the right word, but they're like in our case, you go from a federal to a state official to a local official, and then you have a bunch of other entities that have say, like in our case, the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, got it out. And these other really big agencies that are, associated maybe within the county or broke off or split off. And it's like, I want to build something. It's like, okay, get out your pen to write down acronyms of
Yep.
who's gonna be in this process. But I could see no, it's interesting because like on my side of it, I had a lot of interest in the political world, but I never beyond, taking a political science course, had never done anything officially with it. But in this role, in this, working at airports, I am often maybe not amazed, but at least part of it, the thought is, I didn't realize I'd spend this much time talking to legislators,
Right.
and trying to push forward different dynamic ideas. Because, the reality behind it is if you're in this space, if you're working at airports and stuff, if you're not out championing what you want to do, other airports are going to get the message across, and they're going to
Yep.
get access to capital that isn't a normal stream to do things like maybe help an FBO partner in a ramp space or a taxi lane or whatever it might be.
Yep.
And so it is interesting how much time you actually spend in that world and then see kind of behind the curtain. I would imagine for you, though, I worked with the HUD secretary a little bit in Laredo, and we actually had, I want to say, Henry Cisneros
Mhm.
was one of the HUD secretaries that now does aviation infrastructure, and they were doing a project down at Laredo. I think it's like Triple I Partners, something like that. But him and his son do
Interesting.
it. But it's also weird how HUD also, at least in my orbit, has seemed to wrap a little bit back and forth into the industry.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Yeah, and everything you say makes I agree with 100%. I mean, it's just I think people sometimes discount the amount of um and even when I say politics, it's little p politics. It's not Republican Democrat politics. It's really just the idea that you have to work with state, local, federal governments, the boards, the economic development entities, the lobbying efforts, both kind of from a specific airport perspective. But then you start getting into bigger policy, tax and airport support, and and then even at the federal level when you start getting engaged in groups like NBAA or NATA, or I should say NATA, because I want to make sure I get the brands right. AOPA, et cetera. There's all these pushes for certain kinds of legislation or for funding, and they're all important, and they all
Yeah.
affect us.
Yeah.
And so if we don't get engaged, and stay engaged, and especially that, the next generation, our generation doing it, it's really important, because there's just a number of issues at play right now that, and I think our industry is really getting ready to go through some pretty transformational changes,
Yeah.
with what we're seeing, in the advanced air mobility space, what we're seeing, across the regulatory space, what's getting pushed right now from air traffic control. All of these things, I think, are going to change our industry greatly, and we've got to have a seat at the table and can't neglect that from a broad perspective. So,
Yeah, no, it's a beautiful message because I agree too. I mean, everything is always in flux and change. I do like how you put us in the next generation coming up and not not somewhere in the middle of this thing.
well, I mean, just because the hair's gone,
Right, yeah,
there's
right.
not too much gray there.
Yeah,
So,
right, right, right.
it's It is
Um,
interesting though. I mean, the generational orbits kind of folks, and I mean, I don't know about you. I'm not planning on retiring anytime soon, and there is kind of a generation that's retiring out right now, and I think our generation is coming into the leadership of the industry now, and then we're
yeah,
trying to drag that next generation up as well. So we're
right.
kind of, I feel like we're in the middle, is
Yeah, no,
probably
no,
the
no. I,
case.
I absolutely would agree with that. It's interesting when you move through different stages of your life, and I don't know. For me, at least, it's kind of like, and then I'm like, oh wait, like I guess I'm more, like when I started, right? There was like this group of, especially even, I'd say I'm trying to remember. I guess the greatest generation would have been before the baby boomers, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah.
And that generation's pretty much out of the workforce now, or passed on, whatever. And now the baby boomers are getting more to that point. But it's interesting to me because there's still, a few in there, but you start your career out, and to your point, it's like that's the spectrum of mentors and leadership, and people maybe that were, I'll just say, jackasses, some of them, but a lot of them were good. Some were jackasses. But it's funny because as you get into that next kind of stage, and like I'm talking, so, I had a presentation in Atlanta, and it was with a bunch of younger folks. One of them actually came on the podcast, which was really fun. And, I'm thinking to myself of what was said to me and what resonated and what I really liked. And I did say to him, I'm like, this is your opportunity to go find, those FBOs or those airports or whoever maybe you want to try to work with. And it's a great opportunity to assess that group of people that are just jerks,
Yeah.
because there's some of those out there, and you'll see them. Um, and there's this part where, there's some amazing talent that leaves the industry, and you're like, oh man, I can't believe that person's gone. Like, they're not gone, but just, and happy for them. They're off doing their thing. And then there's some people that leave, and you're like, thank God they finally, bye.
See ya.
See you next time. Oh, never. But no, so this, I got to ask about this because Kyle was on. I know you said you're friends with Kyle, and Kyle and I think are friendly at this point. And so we talked for like over 3 hours in a car in the parking garage at Midway Airport, because he was coming in to do the podcast in person, and then his flight got delayed, and it just didn't work where I was going to bring him back up. So I had to, we improvised and did it in the car. But when we were doing it, we had these conversations about, you know, FBOs and airports and AOPA, and quite honestly, the relationship has frayed a lot over the years. And
Yes.
with people like Kyle there, it has seemed to, greatly improve. And I'll be the first one to say, on our end, there are cantankerous airport managers, and that doesn't help this scenario. And I can be upfront and honest about that on our side of the world. And Kyle has a personality where I feel like he breaks through a lot of those communication barriers,
Yeah.
which is great. But the one thing that I asked about what you do, or what you did do with AOPA and now your current role, I do love that you have that perspective, because quite honestly, a lot of times the biggest gripes you hear from AOPA members are around FBO relationships. And so, do you feel that, like legislative, that also helps you in your role with jet access and, I guess,
It
getting
does.
access?
I mean, I'm a GA guy, right? So, like, I
Yeah,
mean, I had that opportunity. I love GA. I'm passionate about it. But you run a business too,
right,
as an
right.
FBO, and there's a, I kind of, one of my favorite quotes, kind of from a leadership perspective, is there are not problems to solve, there are tensions to manage. 'Cause
Oh,
everything's about balance, right?
right.
And I think that's where we've gotta get to, even in this discussion, is, and especially politics today are frankly about extremes. And
Yeah,
at the end of the day, like, we gotta find the middle ground here. And in this particular policy case, there's some middle ground, and there's some different things that are driving people, different policy issues that are pulling different ways, different business dynamics, with the advent of more private equity in the space, et cetera. There's a lot of different things kind of tugging at different things. And for us, and I believe as we run our business, we've got to look at that balance, right? Thankfully, we're family owned, privately held. Like that helps a lot in that case because we're not we're not beholden to shareholders and kind of frankly the sometimes awkward decisions that are made by publicly traded companies that don't necessarily make good business sense. They're shareholder decision making. And then even in the private equity space, you're looking at something that, is typically a 5 or 7 year hold time. So you're really trying to juice, as much profit as you can, but you're not necessarily doing it with a long-term, you know, horizon in effect. And that's not true of everybody. So, I'm drawing some blanket, conclusions that aren't necessarily true of every space, but there's some truth in all of that.
Yeah.
And so I think having that background though to kind of look at it and be able to kind of even in my own head balance those tensions, right? Of like how do we do it? And we're even, we're looking at some stuff right now like on 100 low end pricing, where we may have gotten a little out of market in some places and we're going to try to fix that and adjust that. But there's also some truths and we can dive into these, everybody wants T hangers right now. Well, there's just some economic truths about building T hangers in today's environment that are different than 20 or 30 years ago that you can't get away from a business perspective. I
Right.
mean, they cost what they cost to build and operate, and somebody's got to, at the end of the day, like somebody's got to pay for that. And
Yeah.
so, like, those are hard messages. And that's where I think with groups like AOPA, and I had a dinner with Darren Pleasance, the new president of it,
Yeah.
a couple weeks ago. He actually did his last town hall here in Indianapolis right
That's
before they
great.
did the high school symposium
Yeah.
um, downtown Indy, just last week. And so we got a chance to catch up. And I can tell you, he is a thoughtful and inquisitive guy who, I mean, I love Mark. We had a great relationship too, Mark Baker. So all of them are great.
Yeah.
But Darren's got a very thoughtful approach to things, and I think is willing to really understand. I mean, he's got a business background. He worked at McKinsey, Google, several other places. So he's certainly got that business understanding to understand what we're doing or what we're dealing with. And I think there's a desire to really understand, well, what are the things driving all of this and how do we come to some conclusions? Because frankly, at the end of the day, with this whole kind of FBO airport, at the end of the day, we just need funding
Yeah.
to do the infrastructure, to maintain the infrastructure and do the infrastructure improvements that we need. At the end of the day, like that's the bottom line need. And so that's where I think we can actually all collectively come together and figure out how to make that work. Um, and I think AOPA is more open to that. And yeah, guys like Darren being there now, and certainly Kyle, has had that approach and can understand it. And yeah, there are going to be times where we're going to disagree, but I think at the end of the day, we can all work together because we do have a common goal of advancing our airport infrastructure and frankly making general aviation accessible to more people. I mean, if we can all
Yeah.
agree on that, then the hows are just again that tension you got to manage and figure out how to balance all the competing interests. So
It's a great message. And a lot of it, when you were speaking, hits to my ear of, things that, we sit down and we have, a contingent of piston pilots, and I'm always upfront about it. And I'll talk about, you know, like we just built a new tie down area and we used the bipartisan infrastructure law funds to
bill,
build the ramp out, and it was about $2.6 million. And, I said, we had a lot of latitude with those funds. We could have expended them however we so choose, and we chose to build a ramp space because we like, their message. They do things like the Young Eagles or Civil Air Patrol. There's all this stuff that comes that's good to your point about getting people in the industry. I was like, but here's the background numbers. I was like, with the grant, we're at 109 years to break even on what we charge for a tie down spot. And that's why someone like Jet Access, has a lot of reservations to build something that caters to those type of aircrafts. It's the same, with our T hangers. And I often, to your point about it, I'll talk to people about T hangers and I'm like, they're not huge money revenue producing units. And you're lucky if they are really at all. And
no,
that, when the FAA reauthorization happened, we had the Government Accountability Office. There was Senator Budd's amendment to have the accountability office look at FBO transparency prices was kind of the crux of what they were looking at. And I talked, they came out and I said, yeah, I'll talk to you. And I also had them talk to some of our piston pilots that, probably see things a little 180 from where I do. Um, and I said, no, but it's good perspective to get to your point. We're all in the same kind of sandbox. And, there's enough targets on aviation from people that aren't a part of the industry, the ones that are a part of it, even if we're in different, silos within it. If we can't find some agreement, some middle ground to all this, it's just it's gonna there are warning signs on everything. And I think part of, as I said to the Government Accountability Office, is like one warning sign is, yes, it is expensive. It's expensive for someone to own a 172 or even like a tri pacer or something like that, and fly and just be a part of it. It is. But the other side to it is most general aviation airports don't make money, and they're subsidized from local
Yep.
taxpayers. And when you start talking about protecting resources, that's not a good scenario either, especially when a local taxpayer is saying, well, what does the airport do for me? I don't even fly out of that thing.
Yep.
Um, and so, but with the FBO transparency pricing, I said, I have four flight when I fly. And I was like, and I'm not, if I'm already in that space, I'm kind of committed to, I know it's going to be expensive. I was like, but I have never once, and this is true against any FBO, I have never once been given a fee that I was not aware of ahead of time. And maybe other people have that happen because you hear it, but I was like, I've never had it happen. And I was like, I typically call ahead not for fees, but I'll call ahead to a fixed base operator because I'm in a 172 and I don't want to ruin their ramp. Like, where would you like me to go that I won't be in your way? Um, but and also, those things like, are you guys open, to a certain hour? And if so, can I get back
The
in, that
rental
type of
car,
stuff. But
courtesy car, all that. Yeah.
yeah, right. But I was like, with even just something as simple as ForeFlight, I was like, you can push the overlay button and it will show you fuel prices. All it is, like, now it's probably piping that through AirNav or something. I don't know. But I was like, and it's probably the same ideology as somebody changing a gas price at a gas station on the side of the road. It's probably close to accurate, but maybe, there could be a little variation in it. I was like, but I don't see this huge transparency issues. I don't know if you've seen it, but I don't really see that as a, not only as an airport manager, but as a pilot, I don't really, I'm not saying that there aren't fees out there, but I think we could also argue, and I've said this to AOPA, I'm like, most airports and most FBOs are not what you would probably consider a concern. But if we're being practical too, and you want to fly your 172 into Henderson during the Super Bowl, I mean, you're kind of going to have to expect there's going to be an exorbitant fee. I mean, I
Yep.
wouldn't do that. Again, it's just kind of deciding, where your headspace is.
Yeah, I think there were some challenges with transparency, and they've gotten a lot better. I think even some of the bigger operators have jumped onto that, and so I think there is, and I think sometimes even the word transparency is even more about the number of fees, what's included, what's not. Do you have the security fee, the infrastructure fee, all these other kind of, additive things. But I think it's getting better. And I think in general, and I think what AOPA would say to this, and like discussions I've had over the years, is it's not and I think sometimes the rhetoric has kind of painted the industry, but it's usually about a couple of operators and a couple of very specific locations where there's an issue. I do think some of the discussion now is trending, or you mentioned it, Super Bowl, but is trending around special event fees. There's a lot of discussion. I was at the NATA Aviation Business Conference last week. That came up quite a bit. Just the special event fee pricing, or as some people are calling it, dynamic pricing, related to higher capacity events, because it's not just Super Bowls anymore; it's other things. Okay, what are those? When are those? But at the end of the day, frankly, it's a free market economy. So
Yeah.
if you're close and you've got limited ramp space and you can charge it, and your ramp is still full, and then an adjacent airport 20 minutes outside of the facility, or 20 minutes further, is got much significantly lower fees and has the ramp space, that's free market, at the end of the
Right.
day,
Right.
frankly.
Yeah.
And so there's some realities to that, and frankly, only again when it comes to special events, I've done several, been involved in Super Bowls and college football playoffs and All Star games, and a lot of times they're frankly better off going 20 minutes further drive away than being at the primary airport that they're spending 3 times as much, that then has a 3 hour taxi delay. So yeah, maybe it's 10 or 20 minutes less drive, but you've ended up at an airport and you're sitting in your airplane for 2 hours waiting to taxi out or
Mhm.
waiting to get de-iced or whatever it might be at a big primary airport, when if you'd just driven 20 minutes further, you could have hopped into your plane, taxied out and gone and spent half the time.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
so markets kind of take care of some of that, I think,
Right.
too, and we
Right.
have to kind of let the markets play out. And I realize that's not a perfect answer to all of it, because airports are, you know, sometimes there's only one airport in a certain area serving a certain market, et cetera. So that's not a perfect answer to that question. There are, when you look at it like Aspen and Eagle and some of the stuff that happens out there, it's that's it. That's your choice to fly into that area and not have to drive 2 hours from Denver or some other place. So
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think, again, if we're being honest and practical about it, right? And you and I both are, and I mean even the same with Kyle. There is, there's something to be said too about, utilizing the system. And so maybe some of those airports that don't get as much traffic, to help support the system, because it does go back to, it's not really a mystery. There's probably, I don't know, 30, maybe 30, 35, 40 general aviation airports that turn a profit. Well, I don't know, it could be I'm pulling that number out of what I'm assuming from what I understand from 25 years in this industry. But, you look across, a Centennial, a Teterboro, Van Nuys, Chicago Executive, these airports, there's not a big mystery to it. They're close to a large population base, and they can make money where they're not a burden on the local taxpayer. But for all of those, there's the Stark County, Indiana's, which I love Stark County, but there's that's the vast majority of airports, and so if there's a way to tap into those resources, kind of like you had talked about, or even at the beginning with eVTOL and things of that nature, I do think it will be better because I see the threat out there of, we have Santa Monica, who knows, but looks like in 2028 potentially closing, and I think that sets a precedent for other communities to say, well, we don't even use this thing that costs us $500,000 a year. And
yep,
when you have, a
Cleveland's doing
concentration
the
of,
same thing right now. I mean, they've got their own
yeah,
Midgefield situation.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah. And so, you run into that across, the spectrum. It's kind of like, well, eventually, if we can't figure out a way to use the assets effectively, and that goes back to when we talk about, okay, there's these, maybe higher fees, not even maybe, there's these higher fees associated, but it's the same to your point of a capitalistic society. I mean, I drive 45 minutes to work, not because I love the commute, but because houses are 5 or 6 times cheaper the further away you get from Lake Michigan. And surprise, surprise, right? I mean,
right.
it's the way life works. And so it's the same, on the airport spectrum.
It's the same
Uh,
same same point, yeah, and that's why we have a reliever system. I mean, it was
yeah,
the system, to your point, it's an airport system. It was designed this way, and sometimes I think we forget to use it like that. Or not forget, but the
right.
dynamics of it don't necessarily force it. And I think, at the end of the day, pricing and some of those other things will force those decisions and allow people to frankly spread the dynamics out across a broader portion of the aviation system. So,
Yeah,
you know.
no. And to the AOP, I said to him, I was like, I could envision a scenario where there could be potential some transient ramp space. I was like, but it's something that has to be discussed with the FBOs. They've put in infrastructure money. I was like, now, the reality behind it, they most of the time, especially at a busy location, they don't really want Jeff Miller there with his 6 gallons of sign anyways. I was like, but I've also been on the flip side to that where, you know, if you have bad actors coming in and trying to run illegal charters or something out of a transient ramp space and circumventing FBOs, I was like, if we can agree there's bad actors on all sides, including the airport side to it, I was like, and even bad FBO operators, to be quite honest. There are
Oh
those
yeah,
FBO operators out there that probably don't help that narrative. You know, to eh, again, not something I've experienced directly with things like transparency prices, but that doesn't mean it doesn't happen out there. And I think you're right with technology and stuff. I think we've hit a spot where it's a lot harder to hide those type of things.
yeah.
But you end up in a monopoly spot or something, local mom and pop type scenario. Who knows? Usually those are the better ones. Some of the bigger corporate infrastructure ones, you hear a lot more complaints about. um,
Well,
but
and I think a lot of it has to do with, um, I mean, at the end of the day, like for us, we've got some sole source operations,
yeah,
and I think it's about, and again, we're a company, we have a profit motive. Let's just be frank about that.
yeah,
But at the end of the day, there's also a certain degree of responsibility that you have to hold with that. Um, and again, the reality is if we were acting in a monopolistic way and raising prices and being kind of ridiculous, being out of market, etc., which we really try not to be, um, then if we were acting like that, then again, the capitalistic kind of free market side of things, people can come in and do things. I mean,
yeah,
just because you're the sole source FBO operator doesn't mean somebody else can't build a hangar and get a private fuel farm.
right,
It doesn't mean that they can't, a second FBO couldn't try to come in.
right.
There's lots of things that, there are barriers to entry, there are some challenges, but at the end of the day, you still have to act responsibly in those spaces. And it may not be tomorrow, but eventually then the market will correct itself at some point,
Yeah, yeah,
and that so I think we've got to, as operators, got to keep that in mind. I think the other thing that you said that just is interesting is there are bad actors everywhere, and I
yeah,
think when you've got to be careful it is making sure that you don't paint the picture of an entire industry or entire portion of an industry simply because of the couple of bad actors that might be at play. I think
yeah.
we all have our bad actors in our segment, in our industries, and in our segments of the industry, but that isn't necessarily true or paint the picture of the entire industry as a whole. And so
Oh,
I
yeah,
think we have to be a little bit careful about dealing, you know, it's kind of that old adage, even just as you operate your own business, don't create a policy just to fix the one person's
right,
actions. And the same is true of don't create policies that because there are 5 bad actors in play out of 5,000 airports, let's not create policies that affect everybody. Let's address these things on a localized one-on-one basis.
right. You're absolutely right. But us as an industry, especially like on the I'll say on the regulatory side to it, it is definitely, oh, one thing happened one place, so let's ruin it for everybody.
Well,
Like, okay.
well, and that's
Yeah.
that's played out, through, I mean, even the aviation safety side of the world. It's
Yeah.
played out through, the insurance side of the world. It's really what's frankly driving up some of our costs of operating as an industry, has been the one-offs, and those things that have driven policy decisions, financial decisions, etc. Um, down a path that isn't necessarily characteristic of the industry as a whole. So,
Yeah, no, I mean, you're spot on with it. Quite often when, especially if it's, as the airport operator, you're peeling back something, maybe an incident or accident or something that happened somewhere else. And now there's new regulations or policies in place, or even just things, like in the state of Illinois where, some of our past governors are in jail. Um, and so, right, I don't remember the whole list. I think one was pardoned recently. Um,
can we
but
make an infographic here? Is
yeah,
that
right. But it's funny because you have politics at that height, probably back to your days in DC, that level that are there's, levels of corruption, but very seldom was it ever. As a matter of fact, I don't know of any airport in Illinois where this has been an actual thing. But all the cascading rules and effects that start to stranglehold productivity and development and all that stuff, and it's a lot of it results from something nobody ever did in any role that I'm associated with, was way up here stuff, but it all
Yeah,
rolls downhill, I suppose.
it does. It does.
Does.
So,
So you were the AOPA and you got hired on to run a local FBO. That must have been, I mean, from going from doing marketing And you said you went back and got up to your instrument rating. Did I hear that correctly for
Yeah, I've
flying?
got that's all I've got at the moment. So
Okay, that's good. I mean, that's all you're in my book. That's all you really need.
yeah.
What else are you gonna do?
Well, it
Um,
keeps I've thought about getting the commercial, but I'm like, that opens up too many doors for people to try to, make me do things and go
right.
fly in opportunities. And I'm like, no, I can't
Like,
do that.
yeah, let's
Sorry.
grab Sean. Sean was good at running the FBO. He could fly the plane. So how did that come about with from going from really working and championing, which is really cool stuff, the air show, or I guess is it air shows or local, regional,
We call them regional fly-ins, but
regional
yeah,
flights.
yeah.
Um how's that leap happen where they're like, hey, this guy run the FBO?
Well, so this was kind of my home airport. It's where I was operating out of. I was doing
And
a
this
lot of
is
marketing. So
Indianapolis
Indy Exec,
executive? Exactly. Okay.
Indianapolis Executive. Yep.
Okay.
And at that time it was Montgomery Aviation. I was doing a lot of their marketing at that time, and it was kind of where my home base was. I lived 5 minutes down the road, and so I even had like a little office here. So I was doing the AOPA stuff mostly on contract. I did it on contract for several years, and then was actually an employee for a year or two, but a remote employee. So not living in Frederick, I was actually still here in Indianapolis. We were traveling so much it really didn't matter. Um, and then but was also helping other airports and aviation entities doing some stuff both here at Indy and to some degree at a national level. So I kind of had that, I was around a lot. Um, but my honestly my passion was, in that case I was doing a lot of consulting. You're telling an airport or an FBO, hey, you should do this from a marketing perspective, and I can help you, or I'd recommend you do this, and just how I'm wired, like I wanted to lead the thing.
Yeah.
I didn't wanna be telling somebody else what they should do and hope that the result would then happen, but I was like, "I wanna get my hands dirty and do this."
Yeah.
I frankly, I have a passion for leadership. I have a passion for hospitality. So, also when you're in the consulting world, you don't really have the ability to lead a team. You can build a consulting team, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, that's different than, like, leading an operational team and helping develop people and help grow people, and that's just one of my passions and kind of life purposes. And so, just kinda how I was wired, that's
Yeah.
where I wanted to end up. And it was actually an interesting week because I had literally three paths come in front of me: run the FBO, run the airport and be the airport director, or go and continue on full time with AOPA. I had
Wow.
to make a choice.
Yeah, to make a
And
choice. That's three great choices though.
really not bad choices at
No,
all.
not bad.
It was tough, but I knew
Yeah.
where my heart was, which was the business side, and where I
Yeah.
kind of felt like it all could come together the most.
Yeah.
Kind of all the, like, we talked about all the past experiences and knowledge, and then kind of, it's that intersection, right, of your knowledge, your experience, and your passion. When that can all come together, like, to
Yeah.
me, that's kind of where magic can happen.
Yeah.
And for me, that's what running an FBO is, honestly. It's kind of where it all comes together.
So when you came into that environment, because when I left Michigan, the first airport I worked for was it was Manistee, Michigan, so it's smaller,
Yep.
essential air service airport. The airport manager owned and operated the FBO at the time. I think they're changing that right now, but at the time he wore both hats. But I would watch him, and he would run charter, actually, ironically, down Chicago executive a lot. Um, and he had his rates and stuff built in. A lot of times he would take the fuel prices at Chicago executive and apply them in Manistee, Michigan, and then like drop them 10 cents. And people would fly in and be like, what the heck? What about like Cadillac and Grand Rapids? He'd be like, oh, down in Milwaukee, they're charging 10 cents more. But when when you come into that environment, I would think. I mean, I worked at I worked at the FBO in Florida, but I was a line service technician. I was in college. They weren't asking me fuel prices and stuff, but that, like, you walk into that, I guess in my mind, you would never done it before, where you just like, okay, here's the books, here's where we probably need to be profit wise, here's where I'm going to set kind of price points, or were you like, did you find any frustration in that? Or were you like, nah, I got this. I'm just in my own mind. I'm like, I don't know if I would completely knock it out of the park. I think I'd be like, all right, let me take a look at our operations here and figure out what we need to do.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, it was incremental, right? You
Yeah.
know, and I think that's how you just think from a business perspective. You want to walk
Yeah.
into stuff, and you don't want, it's evolution, not revolution, unless you
Yeah.
have to. I mean, sometimes you walk into a mess, and you have to turn the ship hard.
Right.
And there were a few things from a safety perspective. I mean, I walked in, and safety vests were not required. Like
Oh, wow.
that got fixed fast, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Um, aircraft, that were getting put away with one tug operator and no wing walker, that
Wow.
stopped
Yeah.
that day. So there were a few things that, like, operationally, and our owner at the time, Matt Hagens, he had a few directives, but actually one of the things I remember the most, the day that it transitioned over, one, I asked him if he wanted a set of keys. And he goes, "Nope, you've got it." And that was a real message at that point. And then
Yeah.
he said, "There's two things." He said, "Run it like you own it, and if a customer problem ever gets to me, I'm probably going to give them what they want. So why don't you just fix it before it gets to me?" And
I
and
love
you know,
yeah.
I
Yeah.
remember that a decade later, and it,
Yeah.
it really is kind of the approach I took to it. But
Yeah.
as you kind of come in, I did look at it pretty evolutionary. Let's
Yeah.
not make a bunch of immediate changes, but then let's look at it, and let's look at the numbers. Let's look at, competition, really start trying to understand the market, understand how you work with large operators like NetJets and FlexJets and those things, because how you handle those and the pricing of those and the situations there are very different than how you deal with a based operator. And then you start looking at programs like contract fuel and CAA and other things, and does that make sense in this case, or does that not make sense? And you really just got to look at it, I think, one step at a time. And you are dealing with it both from a business perspective, several of those things I just mentioned, as well as an operational perspective. Are we safe? Are we
Yeah.
delivering the service that we say we're going to deliver? I mean, things like that really matter to operators, pilots, etc. Pulling their airplane on time, like, that's simple but essential, right?
Yeah.
And can honestly be a huge frustration. Or if you've forgotten to do a lav service, and somebody opens up the door and, oh my God, it smells. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
eh, eh, but, like, those are the essentials to, like, just making sure you're on top of operationally. You say what you're gonna do. You're on top. You're thinking ahead. You're proactive. All of those things, and some of the uniquenesses of the places we operate at and still operate at today. Again, the place I'm sitting at, I mean, we do some what I would call typical airfield operations tasks too. Like, we plow all the snow,
Oh,
including
you
the
do?
runway.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
So that's a whole different thing to understand. We issue the NOTAMs and the RCAM NOTAMs and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So, learning those processes too, and
Yeah.
the nuances. I mean, I think snow removal is a little bit more of an art than a science.
Yeah.
I mean, you can try to create some matrix of this temperature and this wind, and this is
Right.
what you do, and this is when you put chemical down. But basically, it's like, based on my experience, this is what we should do. And
Yeah, no, it's funny because I have, whenever I work in a colder region and I'm talking with, the staff, you're spot on. I always respect whatever their version, their art, if you will, as you said, of snow removal. Because it's something that people get very near and dear to their heart too. Is like, this is the way we do it, and there's a pride there, and I never want to take away from it. But it is always interesting to me because you're absolutely right. There is this kind of flow and rhythm that these departments get. Do you do you contract that out through the authority, through like Indianapolis Airport Authority, and they pay you guys to basically maintain
so
the
so
airfield?
uh, like the Indianapolis Airport Authority, for example, that manages Eagle Creek and Indianapolis Regional Airport, two of our other locations. They have on-site staff there that do it.
Okay.
But Indy Exec Airport is actually managed by the Hamilton County Airport Authority.
Oh, I didn't know
And
that.
so it's a
Okay.
separate airport authority that's not tied to the big airport authority.
Okay. I didn't know
And
that.
and then they do contract with us because they, uh, a broad perspective, really have one employee, and so that employee kind of sits in your seat,
Yeah.
uh, but isn't capable. But the reality is I've got all these people here,
Yeah.
so why not?
Right.
And we certainly have an incentive to do it well. because we want
Yes,
the
me too.
airplanes to come in. So, we don't have to depend on a governmental entity, and the airport isn't ready to staff up that way. It
Yeah,
actually is pretty interesting. We've talked about it even at the state association level as just an interesting example of where an FBO at an airport can work hand in hand to leverage the resources you have at a what I would call a medium-sized, general aviation airport, where you don't necessarily have to employ a ton of staff, but you leverage the FBO staff to do that kind of an activity.
yeah,
And it's through a contract arrangement. So
yeah,
we track our hours and plow the
yeah.
snow accordingly.
Well, and I would say, you guys have probably the best pulse on aircraft movements, right? In any airport. So yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. No, that is. And then it's also I just assumed it was under the portfolio of the Indianapolis Airport Authority. So that's good to know as well. You have 8 locations. They're not all Indiana, right? Are they all
No.
Midwest or
So we operate kind of from an FBO perspective in three primary markets. So we've got five FBOs that are in central Indiana, or I would call it the greater central Indiana area. North is Frankfort, south is Columbus, and then we've got Indianapolis Executive, Eagle Creek, and Indianapolis Regional Airport, um, kind of in the Indy market. And then Nashville, we've got Nashville, Tennessee. We've got Music City Executive outside, kind of on the northeast side, Gallatin, Tennessee, and then are currently building not a full blown FBO facility, but a private hangar that's really driven more at our managed clients. And our 135 operation, we're building that at John Tune right now. So that's under construction there. So that'll be kind of be our ninth location. Then we
and
have Dallas Executive. Sorry, go ahead.
no, no, go ahead. I interrupted you. Go ahead. Sorry.
So there, just to kind of wrap it up, we have Dallas Executive on the south side of Dallas, and then Quincy, Illinois, kind of as a
Quincy,
little bit of
okay,
a
Quincy, Illinois.
one-off. So those are our FBO locations. Our charter operation has a pretty heavy presence at PBI, and we have a
Okay.
few other independent flight school locations around as well. So
Is that, to my own mind, John Thune, that's also Nashville, right?
yeah, yeah, that's the
Yeah.
heart of Nashville.
Yeah.
So that's
Okay.
that's the Chicago exec, frankly,
Yeah.
of Nashville. I mean, it's and the reality there is there's nothing else really. There's BNA and Tune that's in
Yeah.
Nashville proper, and then you kind of get out to Gallatin, Lebanon, Smyrna, and some other airports, Portland, etc.
Yeah.
But they're more like 40 minutes outside of the market. So
Yeah.
in the market is two airports really, which is an interesting
It is,
challenge
and
for the
then
growth of Nashville.
yeah, and you guys and this is another it's interesting and to me and just to kinda crack into, the kind of thought process here, but you see as an FBO operator that both your operations there in Nashville would be kinda symbiotic to one another. Like, the market doesn't cannibalize one or the other if people are going to, John Thune or I forget the other airport, was it
Gallatin,
Gatlinburg?
Music City exec.
They have a purpose usually to go to either or.
They do, and yeah, we see them very symbiotically, especially as you kind of look across kind of the multi-vertical aspect of our business too. So, you're not just looking purely through the FBO operator lens. You're also looking through the MRO, the charter and management side of things. We have a joint ownership program we call Wing Share, even the flight training side. And that's where it starts to get really interesting as to when you're looking at a market, and not just having, one location within a market, but multiple locations where you can really hopefully, become, um, the industry leader or the industry expert or the go-to. I mean, our goal is if somebody in the Indianapolis market or the Nashville market or the Dallas market, as we grow those additional markets, when they think of private aviation, we want them to think of us, kind of irregardless of the pathway or road that they come to aviation that they think of jet access. And so that's kind of our goal. And so, yeah, you certainly need to be at those key locations, even if it's not in the traditional pathways that you might have been, if you were kind of just singularly an FBO operator, or even frankly, singularly an MRO operator or flight training operator. Having the synergies between the verticals creates a little bit different strategic approach to things.
Is, and I apologize if I heard this incorrectly. Dallas seems to be the outlier from at least the kind of heart of the portfolio right now in the Midwest. Is that not divulge secrets? So you don't have to, but is that the strat? Are you looking to expand outside of? I mean, obviously you already have outside the Midwest to Dallas executive, but is that kind of the goal of the company is to continue to grow
We're,
within the 48?
yeah, I mean, we're definitely looking at growth opportunities as they come. Again, we're not private equity, so we don't have this isn't kind of like a turn and flip deal,
Yeah,
but that isn't that isn't like not our strategy. Our strategy is long term, you know, partner and grow is really our approach to things. And so looking at key markets, we got into Dallas a while ago. I think even potentially when we got into Dallas or got into some of these other locations, the strategy doesn't wasn't necessarily completely the same. But when you think about it, Dallas is an amazing aviation market. I mean,
yeah,
it's a growing aviation market. It's really about finding the right opportunity at the right airport in the right place, right? So,
yeah,
we're at Dallas Executive. It's on the south side of Dallas. It's kind of been an underutilized airport, frankly, for many years. We saw an opportunity there to get into the Dallas market, and to do so in a way that frankly didn't cost private equity dollars to get into, and what was something that we could more get into and grow and build than necessarily come in and just acquire at a premium, for lack of a better way of saying it. And so, I think that's been a little bit more of our look is let's go find the value opportunities that we think we can have an impact on growing and building, excuse me, but in markets that make sense and in locations that make sense. And so I think there's certainly got to be a strategic play to it. Um, but I always kind of say when people, well, are you interested in talk? I'm always interested in hearing the story. I mean, you never know when you might miss. You don't want to miss a good opportunity out there, and
yeah.
so understanding the market and where it's at and how it plays in and what the future holds, um, and where we think we might be able to grow and build something is kind of the look. So it's probably a different approach than a lot of operators out there, because our time horizon's different even as we look
Yeah.
at things. It's not how fast can we grab something, grow it, build it, make it profitable, and flip it. It's how do we become a strategic partner alongside of an airport, et cetera, for the long term and help grow and build um, our business, but the airport and everything alongside of it. So,
Yeah, no, I think, that'll probably resonate with the airport directors, CEOs, and managers that listen to this podcast because a lot of times, I think the messaging around, especially, FBO investment is private equity and turning a profit quickly. And, I think, not I think, I've heard a lot of frustration from airport operators about that model. And, some of the points you made earlier, I get it. It's not like it's lost on me why somebody would want to do that. But I do think that a company that's interested in more of a long-term investment is appealing to a lot of different airport organizations because ultimately, whoever takes over the lease, whoever's there, eventually it comes back to the airport at some way, fashion, form, or another. And if there's issues, that's coming back.
yep.
um, and so I think that probably does resonate a lot. Do you see, I have been seeing a lot of the pop-ups, and some of it I find very ironic. I won't mention names, but sometimes I see these things pop up for webinars and whatnot, of the looming hangar space issue within the United States. There's not enough hangars. There's not enough today. There won't be enough tomorrow. We're not building enough. The ironic part for me sometimes is some of the experts in this field I have experienced in my own personal life in this industry are the last people that ever want to invest any money into building hangars. I'll leave it there. But how does Jet Access look at hangar? Are your hangars? Do you find at a lot of your facilities that you're assessing and saying, do we need to make more investment into storage facilities? Do you think we're at a good spot? What are your thoughts on the trends in that area?
Well, I think we've seen some interesting things from a trend. So long and short of it, it's again, it's very market driven. So where are people moving to and from? I think both from a business perspective and from a personal perspective, we are seeing some of those dynamics play out nationwide post COVID, right? I mean, people were leaving certain cities, moving to other cities. So that all plays into it, frankly, as to where there are shortages. I think one of the biggest dynamics that is true, and I heard a statistic related to some of our airports, but it's even a broader statistic, and I can speak to it anecdotally. Wingspans are getting bigger. You know, the world of Lears there was a statistic that I just heard like in the last couple of weeks that was like I feel like it was like a 20% increase in average wingspans at many of our airports. And I think you're especially seeing it at what I would call the executive airports or the regional airports. Um, so it is changing the dynamic of what can fit in hangars, what can fit on ramps, etc. And I can speak anecdotally at least, like it's real. I mean, I think we've gone from more of a Lear CJ kind of world to more and more people are getting into Falcons, Challengers, Gulfstreams, Globals. And so the wingspans are getting bigger. The need for hangar space is greater. So I think it's real. But I also think you have to kind of bifurcate the question a little bit too. So there's the discussion around hangar space for jets, and frankly, from a market perspective, it's much easier to build those and make them work financially. And I think there are several different ways of doing that too, whether they be FBOs building community hangar space to kind of condo or executive hangar type setups. You've got Sky Harbor and their model out there. There's a lot of different people trying different things in that space that I think are interesting and work and kind of meet different needs where people are at. Um, it gets harder in the piston world, frankly. The cost of construction has gone up so exponentially. There's no way to build a T hangar today less than $120,000 a unit. And you put one hangar door to one piston aircraft. Hangar door is one of the more expensive parts of building a hangar. So, rather than let's just say a 60 by 5 by 60 box that you might be able to fit 3, 4, 5, depending on size, piston aircraft in, that you've got 4 or 5, you know, piston aircraft to one door. The T hangar space is one door, one airplane, and it just makes it expensive. And if you amortize out that cost, I mean, I've not heard a person say that they can build a T hangar and truly cash flow it on like a 20 or 30-year AM for less than 1,000 a month. And most of the numbers I hear floating around are 1,200 or 1,300 a month. But when airports are still charging what they charged 20 years ago at, $200 a month, $300 a month, you can't replace the hangars at that amount. And it's less than a self-storage place down the street. So there's some market dynamics and some challenges in that T hangar space that I think are certainly different than in the business aviation larger aircraft space. I think the market will keep up to some degree with the business aviation space because we can justify it, we can make the numbers work, the businesses can make the numbers work, generally speaking. And
Yeah,
and there are a lot of different options and players. I think it gets harder down over here when people want T hangars. They
right,
really want the hangars. I just don't know that that's a product. And again, you get back into FAA funding and everything, and you get into NPE funding. There's a whole discussion around all that. But feds aren't funding T hangars anymore. Like it scores horribly on that. And then if you use your NPE money to do it, you take a
right,
3-year hit on discretionary. And airports like Chicago Executive are never going to take a hit on discretionary,
right,
because you've got too many projects.
right.
So that whole funding setup, in my opinion, is broken a little bit
Oh
in
yeah,
that space
yeah.
because it incentivizes actually smaller airports where the demand is not at to build hangars because they can use their NPE dollars to do it. But the bigger airports where the demand is at can't use NPE dollars to do it because they've got too many other projects to do.
Well,
So
yeah,
there's a
and the
whole
funny
set of mess with that.
Yo, yeah, no, 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 yeah, you're absolutely right, and the funny thing is with the primary entitlements, for an airport like any general aviation airport, it's 150 grand a year, and so, you're rolling 3 years to get to the 4th year where you're gonna lose it, you can't do anything with a T hanger with that anymore. And to your point,
Three T hangers
yeah,
for
right, right.
450 grand, right?
Yeah, right. And you know that, but the thing with it too is, priority wise, to your point, it scores so low, and you know the basically runway out, right? And there's always money to be put into a runway, right? You either are doing something in the safety area, you're doing a rehab, whatever it might be. And so you know, we've pushed a lot in the state of Illinois for vertical infrastructure money because that probably is a space where we could sit. But I see these articles, you know, I think one was Shelter in Florida where they built T hangars. And so I called down there because I'm like, okay, but there's always a story behind it, right? They wanted a community hangar. And so they worked a deal with the airport to build T hangars that were needed, but it's not based off of the financials to do it. And you know, I've talked to a lot of piston pilots, and I said, well, who in this room, piston pilot group, wants to build T hangars? Okay, we've established nobody. You know, because I'll enter into a ground lease and we'll build T hangars, but you know, they're not huge money makers, as you and I have talked extensively about. But it is, you know, I don't know. I I guess I would say, do you guys operate T hangers at all in your portfolio?
We do
You do.
actually. Yeah,
You
yeah,
do.
yeah. Again, where I'm sitting right now, we operate T hangars that were privately built 20 years ago.
Okay.
And then as part of the way that that deal was set up, it was actually they're bought back from the airport by the airport,
Yeah.
and then the airport leases them to us. So we pay a flat fee from the airport, and then we charge, you know, and we make a little bit of a spread. But I can tell you that spread is like
Oh, yeah.
is I mean,
Right.
we're and they're not they're the most expensive tea hangers in town, but we're not barely making enough to make it worth our while.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and again, those were still built 20. They were really built in 2004. So yeah,
Right.
21 years ago. So even the dollar per of what those cost then to build
Right.
is very different than today. And the lease that the airport's charging us to operate those pretty like I said, makes it, you know, kind of more of a zero sum game, and it's more about, you know, more about making sure that we can take care of all of our clients in different ways than it is about that particular part of the business, you know, being particularly profitable. Um,
Yeah, no, you know, I think it goes back to, you said you sit down and you kind of open the books on a lot of this stuff, and it's the same with any really T hanger development, and to be lucky enough, honestly, to make any money off T hangers, because quite, you know, when you look around the country, and you see it, especially those airports. It's getting a lot less now, but where non-aeronautical items are really being used, because you made the point perfectly earlier, where it was cheaper to get the T hanger than the storage unit down the road, and so people just started renting T hangers to throw stuff
yep.
in, and so it is. You know, I don't know the how to necessarily solve that mystery. One thing, like I said, here on a state level, we've talked about is some sort of state funding mechanism that could build vertical infrastructure that would fit within that pocket, knowing that, you know, it just isn't appealing to the private industry to build that corner of aviation. But I don't know, you know, it's if you were an operator today calling up a jet access location, just more Jeff Miller curiosity, and I had let's say a Falcon, am I getting in a hangar tonight, generally speaking, or do you have to book well in advance if you're transient going to a jet access and looking for a home tonight?
So if you're transient looking for a home tonight, you know, usually it's you go on the list.
Okay.
You know, again, it depends a little on the location, but most of our hangar space, you know, it's I always call it is everybody home or not?
Yeah.
You know, so a lot of our locations, if everybody is home, not all of them, but if everybody's home, we're tight. Meaning you're
Yeah.
probably not getting it.
Yeah.
Now at Indy Exec, we have a canopy we can put you under, so
Okay.
that does actually help even with frost. And
Yeah.
oddly enough, you know, it seems a
Yeah.
little counterintuitive, but it does. Um, but that becomes a challenge. Is everybody home or not? You know, in Dallas, we've got a little bit of space left, and still not a ton, but most of the time you could probably get in there. But certainly, our cold weather environments matter more, especially this time of year, or the thunderstorms during the summer, that etc. Now, a lot of times, enough people are gone that we can make it work. So I'm not saying it never happens, but it generally is a wait list. And even calling in advance, yeah, you'll put yourself at the top of the wait list, but we don't know. I mean, we still got to prioritize our base customers first, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't know who's going to be home or who's not going to be home sometimes till that day.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, the challenge sometimes for operators is they're like, well, I called you super far in advance. Well, I still have to prioritize my base customers. And if
Yeah.
everybody's home that night, or if somebody who was away decides to fly back all of a sudden that day that I wasn't planning on, then I've got to readjust my plan. Um, and so I think that's just the reality. There are some things that I think have helped us. We use remote control tugs, for example, Mototox. There are a couple brands out there that make them, but that has increased our hangar capacity 20 to 30% just because you can stack the Tetris better. And I
Yeah.
am a firm believer it's actually safer.
Yeah.
You have a much more controllability over the aircraft as they're moving. Your visual and ability to see, you can move around. They've been really, really positive things for us. So, we are trying to maximize the space we do have, because again, square footage is expensive. It's expensive to build.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of price competition to hold that down because you're competing against stuff that might have been built 20 or 30 years ago.
Right.
And so people are looking at dollars and cents differently as you're constructing new construction at, I think the national average is over $200 a square foot.
Yeah.
Um, is very different than stuff that might have been built at $75 a square foot 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, it's, we were just talking with some architects about how the prices have dramatically shifted. If I heard you say that correctly, so you use a software system to program out your hangars, is that what I heard?
we do. So we use a software system and then we use remote tugs to actually
Oh,
drive
so
it.
you okay,
Yeah.
okay,
So
nice.
we do use a software system right now to drag it in, and there's actually some pretty cool software that's coming out right now that I've had some discussions with that'll actually like what we now do right now is basically like it's software that's basically the old charts with the cutouts, but it's
Yeah,
just electronic version. You still got to drag them in and kind of make
okay,
sure they all fit. Um, the new software will say, "Hey, this is all my airplanes, and this is the order that they're going out. You build it for me," and it runs through multiple permutations and
yeah,
gives you the best stack based
wow,
on that. And so,
eh
again, that's kind of the AI and technology
yeah,
portion. You're going, huh? There's going to be some cool stuff
yeah.
coming out that's going to make our industry a little bit more efficient and productive as we go forward.
Is that, when it's pushing, is it fully autonomous when the machine is pushing the aircraft in? Okay, so
No, no.
someone is operating the equipment.
Someone's operating it just like they would be a tug and tow bar or
Yeah,
another tow barless solution like Lectrans
yeah.
or something. So they've
Because
got a
that's an
remote control.
interesting thought if you're thinking of, what would be allowable without hanger rash with a tug that's following a computer program that could get it down to an exact science to put it into a corner. I mean, because then you, in theory, if it's running itself, you probably wouldn't even need wing walkers or somebody on the tail because it's software knowing where it's going. It's an interesting thought. Huh.
Yeah, I mean, there's lidar, radar technology, and other stuff
Yeah,
that's starting to people are starting to play with it. There's some stuff out there. Um,
yeah,
you know, I don't think it's prime time yet, and I
right.
think it's early. It's in that beta phase for a lot of this stuff. But again, you start thinking 5, 10 years down the road. And there's also the industry thing that you have to get comfortable with it, right? You
Yeah,
have to make sure that people are comfortable taking out a human element. But I do see our industry, just like all of them,
yeah.
I mean, you go into McDonald's nowadays, as I clearly do on a frequent
Me
basis,
too.
and, you gotta love that double quarter pounder,
That is
but,
true. I have no problems with it.
but, they're encouraging you to use your app. They're
Yeah.
encouraging you to go to that station and have
Yeah.
taken some of those elements out, and, I mean,
I never do
again,
though. I always have the worst experience, not with the app as much, but with the
with the
machines. I
yeah.
and so the guy who invented the machine, he was a tenant at PWK. He sold it off to McDonald's. Yeah, made a bunch of money off it, but and I never had the heart to say anything about it. But, I'll go and I'll be, like, hitting the thing, and I'm gonna blame it on operator error, but then I'm like, "What's" and then people that are just going to the cashier, like, moving past me, and I'm like, "Alright, well."
The 4 people get served at the cashier before you finish your order on the
Yeah, yeah,
kiosk.
and that's the technology gonna go as far as to fix my own ways. My own deficiencies there. Is there anything about jet access? I know we're getting closer to when I told you I would get out of your face, that I haven't asked that you'd like to tell the listeners?
No, I think, I don't know that there's anything specific. I think uh, frankly, we're proud to be part of the industry, and as I was talking earlier, I think, what's unique about us is kind of our approach to the business, the multi-vertical aspect of it, so the management and charter component, the flight training, the MRO. We've got 4 145 repair station locations, both here in Indy, not here in Indy, Nashville, as well as down at PVI. And so, you combine that with sales and brokerage and flight training and all of that. You put all those pieces together. I think that's really kind of a unique play. I mean, a lot of people have done it at a mom and pop level, or you do it kind of as a and also. So, other big operators, great operator, Duncan, amazing MRO. They also do FBOs and they also have, I think, 135 and do some charter, but they're an MRO. What we're trying to do is really be a private aviation company that isn't known for just being an FBO or just being a charter and management company that and also does other things, but really be an operator at all of these things and leverage the synergies of those components together. So I think that creates a lot of value for the end user. Um, and I think that's where it's exciting to kind of come into our ecosystem, frankly. Not to over turn it into too much of a commercial, but that's where we're excited of it from a strategic perspective and from
Yeah,
hopefully a little bit of an industry disruptor perspective, is to say, hey, there's something about coming into an organization and being able to meet all of your needs in one place, and there's value to the end user, to the client in that, as long as we do our part to provide exceptional experience at the end of the day,
yeah.
which everybody calls for. But we think that that's where we can really drive that, so that your experience and the continuity of flowing between our different operations is seamless at the end of the day. And so when you charter out an aircraft or something, that you're at one of our locations, like, you get that experience from the time you drop off, by the time you pull up in your car all the way through to the aircraft, you're handled by Jet Access, and it's
Yeah.
seamless versus, well, come to the FBO, but then I get on a different company's aircraft, and then I go to a different company's location, and there's a bunch of handoffs that hopefully are well orchestrated, but often cannot be. Our handoffs are all internal, and I think that really makes it special in a lot of ways. So,
Yeah, if you, like you said, with your locations, is if it was everything that Access would want in a location, would you offer every branch of your the flight MRO, FBO? Is that ideally when you're looking at an airport where you would like to see your product, or is it that you fit? Is there certain products that you're like, we wouldn't do that standalone? Or it has to be at least this, this, and this, or is it everything you offer is at every location?
um, the ideal scenario is having a broader suite of services.
Yeah,
There are certain things that are harder to do without the other from a business perspective, right? So,
yeah,
mean, yeah, I realize I'm the FBO guy saying this, but at the end of the day, the FBOs, and our CEO would say this, and others, they are kind of the central touch point, right? I mean,
yeah,
they're often the primary leaseholder. They're kind of the ratable business. They're the piece that everything else kind of relies on in a lot of ways,
yeah,
to function well. I mean, for example, if you're an MRO, you need FDO services. You need people to move airplanes. You need people to fuel airplanes. You need, a front desk component, a lobby component. You need all those things. Now, whether you create that as an MRO yourself or whether you attach yourself to an FBO are two different things, but at the end of the day, you need those services regardless. So are you duplicating those services, or are you better off just being part of an ecosystem? So, your question, like, it's, in my opinion, it's hard to stand up an MRO completely by itself without an FBO alongside of it. It's much less attractive,
Yeah.
frankly, from a business, even from a business dynamics case, because the FBO with fuel sales and other things can help kind of balance out some of the challenges in MRO.
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of airports are like, oh, let's try to get a maintenance operator in. I think that's hard, to be frank.
Oh,
I mean, it's not an easy thing. I mean, a lot of times they're going to say, "Hey, I want to operate an FBO too," because there's synergies there that are hard to miss, frankly.
there is, it's interesting because I was just having this conversation. Actually, the episode that will come out right before this episode is with Westar. And I was talking with them about, their operation, and it's like, you see, again, when you and I were talking about a system of airports, I was like, MROs, if that's their main business, the reality behind it is an airport like Chicago Executive Airport is not attractive price point wise. But there are all the aircraft there, right? And so you see this kind of satellite location, get it, to the point maybe where it can ferry to an East Alton or some other airport within somebody's network for MRO work. But yeah, I mean, when you look at where we all serve, our airport like ours isn't going to be like Rockford, Illinois, where you're going to see a huge MRO presence. It's just not the business model. I mean, it's not how it works. So I absolutely agree with that. But it also is good though, because it does serve the system again, that there is a purpose for these other airports that maybe aren't as attractive for the corporate user to fly in and out of because it's proximity to wherever they're going.
Yep.
So it could
Well,
still
and
serve
you
that.
you can make kind of MROs a destination, especially if you're known for something.
Yes.
People will fly to you to get, especially big inspection work, et cetera, done. But you do have to kind of deal with the AOG, the work to get the aircraft to there if they've got a problem, or just getting them spooled back up and able to operate. And so that dynamic is changing, and just even speaking in that world, like, the dynamic is different. The mom and pop maintenance operations that used to kind of exist at every little airport, you know, unfortunately, I mean, it's sad, but that's kind of gone away.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
the reality is, for a lot of mom and pop airports that are like, oh, we got to have maintenance. I'm like, guys, it's just not realistic anymore. I mean, I love you,
Right.
but there's just a reality of the maintenance business, what it costs to operate it. You know, even people who are in it, the owner op, those businesses work by owner operators, right? The
Right.
guy who was owning it, but also turning a wrench.
Yeah.
That group of people generationally is retiring out, and there's not a flow back in to fill that gap completely.
Yeah.
The guys that are taking their A&P licenses today are becoming part of bigger operations.
Yeah.
And so, like it's just a market dynamic that you can't escape, at the end of the day. And
Yeah.
you got to
You
think
know,
about it.
it is. No, it's very interesting. It's just kind of the same even with avionics. I remember when I first started out avionics shops, right? It was very specialized, and you were lucky if an airport you had avionics. But now it's, with the way things have gotten in price points, it's like plug and replace. So the expert taking the radio out and fixing it in the back, they just rip it out and put a new one in. And so even that dynamic has changed because it's shifted to where that's easier for a mobile mechanic to probably handle than anything else probably at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
But
most avionics, especially Garmin products. I mean, we're a Garmin
yeah,
service center. I mean, most of the way Garmin works is take the box out and put in the new box, make sure it's programmed correctly, and the box that's broke goes back to Garmin.
yeah,
And that's true of Honeywell or Collins or any of the other operators too,
yeah,
for the most part. You're removing cars, you're removing whole boxes and sending them back for repair overhaul. And so you're really more of a programmer. You're not sitting there opening up the box, to your point, and changing the capacitor out the blue.
yeah.
It's just not what's happening anymore. So
Do you still fly yourself? Do you
I
fly
do,
around?
yeah, yeah.
You do. What do you fly?
Mostly Cirrus. So
There.
yeah,
Oh, well, okay. I'm
I'm a
fancy over
Cirrus guy.
there.
We're 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 actually a training center and a service center,
Oh,
for Cirrus. It's a great product, and
it is.
so
It
so
is.
I jump in one of our flight school planes when I get a chance,
Yeah.
That's usually how I hop around. So
That's
if I
nice.
get
I mean, that's a nice experience. I personally, I've never actually flown a Cirrus. I hear good
we
things
can
about
fix
them.
that.
I know. You're right. I appreciate that. Actually, what I started just training on, because I think I mentioned in this podcast in the past, but I want to buy a Waco in the spring or summer,
Oh,
and so I
gonna
just
go over to
start.
Battle Creek and look at those.
You know what? So I don't know if you met if Peter was at AOPA when you were there, but he restarted Waco out of Battle Creek, and now he works for AOPA. I think in their might be their government liaison section or somewhere there. But very nice gentleman. He knows every one of them like children, because I'll be like, there was like a brown one with a white. He's like, oh, yeah, Larry owned that in Indiana, and then I went to Texas. Um, but no, and so I started doing my training down in Aurora in a super decathlon.
Okay.
And just because I don't know in your experience if you've flown a tail dragger, I never had. So I
In fairness, I mean, I feel like I'm like waving a wand to the world because it's gonna say, "Oh my god, you haven't flown a tail dragger." I'm actually I'm due for my biennial right now,
yeah,
and I'm talking to a gentleman who instructs for us, but has a decathlon, and I'm like, let's go do some tail dragger and some spins.
nice, nice.
And the tail decathlon or Satabria, I'm one of the two.
Yeah,
But let's go do something that like I don't usually do, rather than
yeah,
just go fly the Cirrus around for my biennial. Let's go add something. So
yeah.
I am talking about doing the tail dragger because I haven't done it before.
Well, it was funny because everybody's giving me great advice, and then when I went down, old school flight instructor, he's like, "We could talk about it all day long." He's like, "90% of it's in your head." He's like, "Let's just go." And from on the first few times of death gripping the stick, um, I started to feel, because my concern in my head, I'm like, okay, center of gravity's the back. Is it going to feel like it's porpoising when I'm landing? I didn't feel any of that. You hear the stories and you watch the videos online of the ground loops, and I'm like, oh no. But, it was cool to have someone kind of just more practical. And, he was like, ground loops typically happen when you're taxiing because you think you're good enough at that point and you're rushing and blah, blah, blah. And so it was. I feel so much more confident about it. I didn't know how I was going to feel until I actually flew a tail dragger. But, because in my mind, I went up in this Waco in Port Clinton, Ohio,
Okay.
about a year and a half ago. And, I just loved it. I loved the plane itself, and I was like, "Oh, this is what I can do. This can be part of the podcast. It's gonna be so much fun." And I'm like, "Could I actually fly the thing though? Is that possible?" And so I feel more confident in that world now.
That's fun, yeah. No, it's that's what makes aviation fun is getting to do, do experiences like that, add ratings, and honestly kinda stay at the roots of it. So, I mean, to me, it's about the airplanes are a lot of fun, and then the people are fun. I mean,
Yeah,
that's why we
nice.
all tolerate the headaches that this industry gives us because, it's not an easy industry to be a part of, from a time commitment, you know, there's a reason we're not sitting in the back of the airplanes as well. So, you know, going going, "Ooh, you're flying a Cirrus," and I'm like, "Yeah, but it's our flight school Cirrus, it's not
Right,
mine."
right. It's
Or
kind of like Crockett in Miami Vice. It was just
yeah,
like, how did he
exactly.
afford this boat and everything? It's right there. No, well, that's great. Well, thank you. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, Wenna? I know I said that kind of blatantly about Jet Access, but anything else that you'd like to say to the listeners before we sign off here? Since I've officially kept you 7 minutes longer than I was supposed to, so thank you for indulging me there.
No, no, that a lot of fun. Really, this is honestly like one of the first podcasts I've done, and it's really a lot of fun. I mean, obviously, love just talking about the industry and where we're at, and I think the dialogue's important, that we have it, and that we do things like this. It's fun to see a lot of people like yourself doing this. I've seen several kind of, recent podcasts and YouTube groups kind of start. And I think the dialogue's important and it's a different way of getting the message out than we have in the past. But I think we need to be talking and frankly, like I mentioned earlier, working together to drive the industry forward and solve problems that are out there at the end of the day. And I don't think the relationship between the FBO, the airport, the operator, and industry, whether that be any of the alphabet groups, it doesn't need to be contentious. It needs to be collaborative. And I think we can all find solutions to these problems that we can all live with. We just need to not sit in our corners and poke. Instead, we need to get together and talk about it and figure out solutions. So,
No, that's such a constructive messaging to give out to everybody because I think we all, like I said, we'll sit in our silos within it and we'll hear, well, I don't like this and I don't like that and I don't like what this FBO operator did and blah blah blah. And it's like, well, okay, to your point, we have a little different perspective on it, but the mission's the same. But I do have to say one last thing with that, because you guys do a great job with this, and I know that because our communities were enthralled when you brought it. But your monster truck with the flight simulator in the back of it, that you found a way to resonate and connect with kids, and kudos to you for that. And I probably didn't do it exact justice there, but I say monster truck, but it's like a monster semi
yeah,
truck, box
it's
truck.
it's an old military dually that we kind of shrunk a little bit, but
Yeah.
hopefully some of the listeners have been up to Oshkosh because we put it front and center, kind of up at Oshkosh, right on the corner by the vintage, the big vintage red tower there. If you're right there, you'll see us right there on the corner, right next to Textron in the front of the hair,
Yeah.
and so yeah, hopefully next year at Oshkosh, come see us, come visit. We'll have it up there again, and and you can at least come to we camp out at Camp Scholler, and I throw about 15 pork butts on
Nice.
the and some chicken and some other stuff, and we have a
That's
big
great.
camp out. So
Well, I know where
um,
I'm going now.
yeah, yeah, open invitation to everybody and all the listeners. Come on out and enjoy. So just
Well
stop by the booth and we'll tell you where.
and the cool thing about your truck, right, is, the back of it's a flight simulator, right? So people
Yep, yep.
I've seen when you came to our airport, I saw, the kids like every year, "Oh, when's the truck coming back? When's the truck?" Like, it's such I have not seen something resonate as much as that truck seems to resonate, especially with young kids.
It's a fun thing to do. We love taking it around to airport community events and stuff. We've learned it's a little hard to drive on big roads
I
for,
assume.
for long distances, and so we've had to kind of figure that out a little bit. So the logistics become a little more challenging than they used to be. But the reality is you're right. It hopefully brings a smile to the faces of the kids that are participating in it. And I think for all of us, I don't know how you got interested in aviation, but I think almost everybody's got that story of the first time they went to an air show or they went to an event and it piqued their interest.
Yeah,
And we can't, the air show industry is got its own challenges, etc. But that's really what started, I think, the passion for a lot of us. And we I think it's incumbent on all of us to give back in a way. And that's our way of doing that and of engaging the community. And it helps tell our story a little bit. But at the end of the day, it's also just a tool to help drive an interest and a passion for aviation, and we have to continue to invest in that way. So
I think that was is that idea where that came from? Because it's so unique, was that really your owners that wanted, to
yeah.
your point, give back and have something that, the community could really see, "Oh, this is what they do," a type of is that where that
It
started?
was kind of, our flight training team along with our owners, our owner loves big, loud things. So I
Yeah,
think the size and scale of that and the speakers that go attached to it when we're
sure.
allowed to at locations, we can kind of put on a rock concert from that thing if we need to.
Love it.
Um, but but then also just the idea that we can, get out there and tell the story,
Yeah.
was kind of a collective approach to it.
Well,
So
it's such a cool thing 'cause it goes back to you as a company and really drives home your messaging, I think, that you're in it for the long haul, you care about it because you don't have to do things like that, and that is revenue on a line, or expenditure, I should say, not revenue, expenditure on a line, really to give back, and you've always been so generous and I'll say even come to our airport where you're not at and showcased it to young students and families and stuff around, and they loved it. So thank you for what you do there, and thank you for always being so gracious with, allowing people outside of even the jet access portfolio to see that because I think it does so much to the point you made for someone who maybe wasn't even thinking about aviation. Be like, oh, hey, that's
yeah,
really cool. That's
yeah,
that's
that's pretty
neat.
fun. That's cool. That's
Yeah.
exciting. So,
Well,
and opens
Sean,
hopefully their mind to other things. So yeah, absolutely
I
happy to
I
do it, and hopefully get to do it again.
I love it, and I got through this whole thing without even asking you about your snowboarding career. So maybe next time we
Well, the haircut is a little less, and for some reason I don't have the following that he does. But I can tell you this: I've disappointed a few people at the carryout window. Who think they're getting a celebrity, and this is what they get instead.
Hey, you're a celebrity in my book.
So,
Well, Sean, thank you so much for being on Destination Aviation. It was my honor.
my pleasure doing it, and look forward to hopefully doing it sometime again.
Yes, same here. All right. Happy holidays to you and your family.
Yeah, have a great one.
Well, we had a great conversation there with Sean, as usual. So this will be fun, kind of moving forward. It's a new dynamic and perspective for me as I get to play around with some of the doohickeys, as a reference back to the previous episode with Westar. Some of the doohickeys associated with Riverside, and so looking forward to getting into messing around with some of that. Wanted to say I hope everybody had a great Thanksgiving. I know I'm actually recording this before I head out for my travels, but there'll be another episode before this, and then you will be getting this after everything. So we all had fun. Nobody got in any political fights. We just had, a former political person on our podcast, so that's an omen for no political fights over Thanksgiving. But I hope everybody had a great time. If you love the interview today or you like the content, please reach out to us I'll put the beep in, dapodcast85@gmail.com. That's your source to find anything that you want about what I do, why I do it, where I'm at. My last flight on the decathlon got scrubbed for maintenance, so hopefully we'll be back down and training on that soon. And I think I'll work on a narrative. That might be kind of interesting with the whole camera thing. And seeing that perspective to it. So I'll work on some of that and got some ideas brewing in my bald head about things that I want to do with this podcast. But as always, thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in, listening to us. And until next time, my friends, I'll see you down the runway.